Welcome to episode 3 of the Zooch and Wilde College Football Podcast. And Zooch, if you can't see my name here, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I am almost embarrassed for how wrong I was, man.
It was I was I was pretty surprised. Like if when they
Colorado
came
made
out and
they came and punched TCU in the mouth, man. And I was talking all last week about how TCU was going to beat them by 3 touchdowns. I hope Deion Sanders didn't hear our last episode, or he's going to call me out in a press conference, man. We
he might, it was they almost had the perfect game plan because they didn't take too many deep shots because I know their offensive line is kind of spotty. But they just let Shador Sanders sit back there and do some like dump off passes and handed
Yeah.
it off when they need to. And then not that they didn't take big shots. I mean, realistically, they could have had like 63 points because Travis Hunter dropped that touchdown.
Mhm.
A couple other guys he overthrew or they dropped long balls. I think you got to see in that game how good of, obviously he brought in good players, but I think you got to see how good of a coaching staff Deion Sanders.
Oh yeah, I mean, people forget he has. I mentioned last week he had the Kent State. This is a game I really want to dive in. There's a lot of different little quirks and stuff about this game. And I know it's week 1. We don't want to overreact, but I think this game might be truly telling you how the season could go for these two schools. In Colorado, like you mentioned, their coaching staff is loaded. They have Warren Sapp. Is he a full-time coach there?
I'm not sure, but he was up there.
He's
Michael
there all the
Irvin has
time.
been there.
Irvin's always up there, and shoot, it's the old Kent State head coach is there, being an
Yeah, Sean
offensive
Lewis.
coordinator. Sean Lewis, he's there. And if you're TCU, I mean, who's the guy that they got to take over Riley's brother? It's shoot, it's someone else who I should know. Who's the new TCU coordinator?
Uh, because Kendall Briles left. He went to Clemson, which we'll talk about later.
No,
They
it was Briles because it's
okay,
Garrett
okay.
Riley who left. I'll tell you what, man. If you're a TCU fan, I was talking to my dad about this watching the game. Chandler Morris looked so painfully average. I
Yeah,
mean,
he did
all the
not look
throws that
great.
Max Dugan made last year, Chandler Morris didn't make. I mean, I was talking to my dad about this. He looked like a robot. It was literally like a QB robot. It was drop back, look at my first option, look at my second option, force a throw, a run. There was no nuance of reading the specialty of the defense for me. And TCU had the same old defense last year with less draft picks by the looks of it. If you're TCU, the one bright spot is that the Sanders transfer, the running back, looks really, really good. But
Yeah, he
other
was
than that, I
nasty.
think if you're TCU, you, oh, it might be a 7-8 win. Like if you play like that the rest of the year, you'll be lucky if you get 8 wins.
Yeah, because they got. I mean, Colorado pretty much went down the field at will, obviously, because Shador Sanders had over 500 passing yards. But it's almost like they knew what was coming too, and
I got that sense as well.
they couldn't do anything to stop it. I mean, I think Travis Hunter is good, but the man played 110 snaps and was like he had 11 catches. Like you would think that a little bit into the game they would try to move somebody around to be like, all right, we need to get that linebacker with the neck thing on off of covering him because there was like 3 or 4 times
The neck,
that he was
Hodges,
like,
Johnny Hodges from Navy.
yeah, there's like 3 or 4 times that he
Did
was
you see
like
what Johnny
behind
Hodges
him.
had to say this week? He said, "I don't know." It was something along the lines of, "I don't know if there's like a more embarrassing, like embarrassed football program in the nation right now, or something along the lines of that for TCU because of the blowout to Georgia and losing to Colorado first game of the year."
Yeah, and then even Joe Horn Jr. He transferred. I'm not sure exactly where he. I know he's a transfer though,
He's
but
from
even he
USF.
was. He's
USF.
from USF. He was going off on him too. It was. I thought if Colorado won, it would be like 28-24, but it got to like I think TCU was almost lucky to be in the game. Like they had the
They
big
were.
punt return touchdown, or it wasn't a touchdown or kickoff return that they got because I missed that part because we were going into the Washington game. right after Colorado had scored. So I'm like started looking at my phone. I'm like, geez, why is TCU already about to score? That's the reason why. But they had that. Travis Hunter dropped a touchdown pass. It was,
Mhm.
I mean, Colorado could have scored 63 points, and most of those guys didn't get there until after, like, they didn't even, they've been with each other for fall camp, basically. I'm sure they worked out
Yeah.
together over the summer and stuff, but it was, I was amazed at how good they looked offensively. Defensively, they probably have some questions, but I mean,
I
it's not
mean
like the
I
Pac-12
mean,
is
if
known for its
yeah, that's what I
defenses,
mean.
so
If you're in the Pac-12, I mean, Colorado, I'm trying to think of a team. I mean, Oregon didn't really get tested week 1. I mean, we're gonna go into Washington and how their defense. I mean, they look good, but it was against a Boise State team that we'll get more into. I think a Colorado team that I mean, I think your defense doesn't have to be top notch if they want to make a run at this conference. If their offense can score 50 points a game, I think because you're not going to beat a USC who most people would agree and who I think is the top dog of that conference right now.
right.
I don't think you're going to beat them by trying to, oh, we're going to play a defensive stalemate and play field position. No, you're going to have to try to either initially punch them in the mouth and get them off their game, or just try to keep up with them like it's a pinball arcade game and just try to keep up with them with points. And that's what Colorado did to TCU. The thing I was most impressed about Colorado, or something that was like a dark horse impressed to me about, is the whole offseason people were saying, okay, well, we know they got some transfers or some big athletes, but how are those guys in the line going to look? How are the trench players going to look? And yeah, the defense looked shaky at times, but I think they did a great job of scheming for that offensive line. I really did. They
Exactly,
had
and
a
that's
lot of Shadir Sanders on the run, a lot of quick possession passes. A lot of the run plays were zone where they got their guys in space. Because I looked at the size of the Colorado offensive line. They're not the biggest line. They got a couple guys under 300 pounds, and they schemed really well. I don't know who the offensive line coach is for Colorado, but whoever you are, you deserve to eat a ton of chicken wings and beers and ribs and birthday cake and whatever you want this week because you, I think, minus Shadir Sanders and Jackson, you're the MVP of the game. The way that their offensive line was able to handle TCU's.
right, and I think that's what people were kind of missing with this, what Deion Sanders built there. I like, obviously people talked about Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, people he brought in, but no, never really heard a ton of people talking about like the coaching staff. And you saw, like, they knew going into that game, all right, weak point offensive line. Let's game plan to where he threw it like 40 something times and had 510 yards. So it's not like it was just every play, a 35-yard pass. Like that first drive, he went short most of the time. And then when they got to like 3rd and 3, they had that option still to be like, we're going to throw it or run it. And then TCU's defense had no idea where to be, anything like that. So it was almost a master class of, and I don't know how much game planning Deion Sanders does. I don't think he has to. I don't think that's his MO, is to, he's
Hmm.
going to come in. I think he lets the guys he brought in make the game plan, and he's kind of, I mean, you saw him in the locker room before the game. He's the motivator. Like that's his job: motivate people and recruit people. And once they get there, he has good coaches to just let those guys go wild.
All right. One last thing I'm going to say about the TCU Colorado game. Did you see those TCU kids in the stands when whoever who said that? I mean, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've seen the clip. Those kids, man. I mean, I'll tell you what. I don't know if TCU's got a deal. I mean, I've been to their student section. I mean, their student store, and they got deals with like all different kinds of brands. They need to get a deal with New Balances and plain Hanes white socks. Because I mean, man, I mean, it was the fun. It was literally like a scene out of a movie. The Lillian, who said that? And did you see the kid who like throws up like the half-assed like flip off in that video? Like he gives him like the like the elementary school little boom. Oh
It
man,
was, that
what
whole
the
game was hilarious because and what was crazy about that video and then their reaction when with the interception was,
yeah.
I was watching that game on TV at a tailgate, and this guy Travis Hunter came out and I thought it was a touchdown. I was like, "Oh, there's a
No, same.
touchdown for TCU," and he came out of nowhere and picked that ball off. It was
Hmm.
and looked over there. It was the whole thing was great. But yeah, it was a great way to start out the real week 1 of college football.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say it is ironic that a lot of the Colorado Bullets, like, yeah, we punk them kids, them soft kids at TCU. Just look at the student section in Boulder this week versus Nebraska, and it might be the pot calling the kettle black. Um,
Yeah, it
but
was
yeah, the student
anyway.
section in Boulder and TCU are quite identical. But let's get into some other games. FSU. I was also a little. I wasn't as wrong on this game, but I was wrong about FSU. I thought LSU was gonna win, and I was pretty confident going into halftime. And it's like the FSU that came out with a fire and a passion that. I mean, Brian Kelly. I mean, I'll also say Brian Kelly, all time like throw people under the bus guy. I mean, after the game, you're saying, "I don't got we're not as good of a team as we think we are." Well, man, you're the head coach, dude. Like, what are you talking about? But
It
yeah, FSU look good.
yeah, that's and I understand, and I think LSU was a little overrated coming into this year. They had the Alabama win at the end of the game, but they still had 4 losses last year. I know FSU had 3, but yeah, like I didn't really see anything from LSU that makes me think that they could rebound from this game. Like I just didn't. It wasn't,
It no, it seems like it's gonna be like one of those Citrus Bowl versus Wisconsin type seasons for LSU. That's the overreaction. If you're looking at this through the overreaction lens, that's the overreaction. If you're a LSU fan.
yeah, and they still have, Ole Miss, Auburn looked pretty good. Alabama's Alabama. Florida didn't look good, but they played them. I'm not entirely sure who else they play from the East, but Brian Kelly went from dark horse national title contender to kind of, I think, on the hot seat because he's 10-5 now through
Well,
15 games.
it's hard to be the hard ass style coach when you're not winning. You know, it's if you're like the lovable, hey, like, we're gonna be great, we're gonna do all this. I think a lot of the colleges they'll give you a little fudge room, if you have a couple bad games or a little season. But if you run that, I'm the hard ass, everything like this is my program. I'm gonna run it how I want. That's great. Colleges they can say all they want about, oh, we're gonna treat people like right. They don't give a crap about that if you're winning football games. Now, if
No,
you're not winning football games, then there's a different story. Then you're just the jerk that no one wants to be around.
right. So it's looking like it's going to be a long season down in Baton Rouge. You don't really want to start out with a really they were down 28. They got that like blown coverage play
Hmm.
with a minute left or whatever it was, but long season in Baton Rouge and kind of going into the next game with Clemson, but it looks like it
Oh,
could
the
be
ACC looks open. Wait. Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. Coach Sweeney's got that drip, and now he lost to Duke. Dabo
the
Swinney could not have happened to a better person this week. Oh my gosh, this loss could not have come at a better time. Thank you to the Duke Blue Devils. Wow, I'm so excited I can't even pronounce their name. But thank you, Duke. I will never tell you that during basketball season, but thank you, Duke, for beating Dabo Swinney. This is just a pleasure for me to watch on a Monday night.
it was and they kind of got beaten down too. I mean, they're Clemson and they had
Riley Leonard looked
7
good.
points versus Duke. It's not like, a couple years ago when they played Georgia and lost 10-3. It's like, all right, like new quarterback, stuff was moving around. You lost a lot of pieces. 10-3 is acceptable a little bit in that situation, but 28-7, that was the final, right? They didn't score again.
No, they didn't, and they're a muffed punt away from being shut out. You remember that
Yeah.
touchdown came off a muffed punt in the first half, and this is for me. I'm watching this game, and I'm so used to seeing Clemson have these just freak athletes on the field, and besides Will Shipley, no one looked physically imposing on Clemson. I mean, I'm so used
No.
to seeing Clemson have a tight end or a quarterback or a receiver. Just like they look like they're the most athletic on the field. And Clemson, they don't look like the Clemson I'm used to. They look like what Duke is supposed to be. A couple good players that'll get drafted, but they're going to win 8 or 9 games and that's it. Clemson, I mean, they didn't even come close to what their total over was supposed to be with points.
No, it's like
And a lot
33
a
and a
lot
half.
of yeah, and a lot of Clemson fans, you blame DJ Ugielele, who's on Oregon State now, for a lot of your problems. I think if this problem persists, there's going to be some real deep reflection going, whoa, what way do we go? Because Dabo, we know he hasn't embraced NIL. We know he hasn't embraced the transfer portal. The team that we saw on Monday looked like a team that probably could have used 5 or 6 people from the transfer portal.
Yeah, they needed something, and they have to be really worried about this Cade Klubnik guy because he, was supposed to be. And I get it, a
I
lot of
read a
five
Twitter
star.
I read a tweet that said he was only like a 5-star because he had like a couple 5-star like receivers he was throwing to in Texas. But
It could have. I mean, it looks that way right now. Like I get, I don't think he even started a game last year. Maybe the bowl game.
yeah, he started the bowl game and
The
he
bowl
he
game.
got in a lot, but it was all garbage time when they were up.
Yeah, so he's still, young, but you definitely. It was weird though. It's almost like they didn't. Garrett Riley came in there, and they're supposed to be running the air raid now, basically, and they weren't really letting him throw the ball. Like everything was basically 10 yards or less. And I get
Mhm.
that's more of like a run and shoot thing to me, where it's
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of time to pass. Air raid, yeah, you'll do those small passes, but you're also kind of looking deep, like
Mhm.
once every 4 or 5 plays, and
Yeah.
they just weren't. Either he didn't have time to, or they weren't doing it. So it's going to be FSU has to be licking their chops for that game
Oh,
because
I
they've been
know.
getting beat up by
Oh,
Clemson here recently, and I'm not sure if I think that game's in Clemson in Death Valley. Whatever people can argue about what the real Death Valley is, it's in the Clemson Death Valley.
well, it's not.
So
I'll say my Death Valley is not the one where the 50-year-old in khakis sprints down in front of his team like it's all about him. So that's my opinion on the real Death Valley.
it might be a very he's not going to be on the hot seat. He's done too much there, but if it gets to 4 or 5 losses, it might be a slightly warmer than usual Death Valley in late December.
The Clemson, like I said, could not have happened to a better program. We talk a lot about Clemson. I'll just say a little bit about Duke. Riley Leonard looks good, and if that defense performs well, I mean, FSU has the ACC gone away with divisions or no?
No, I believe they still have their divisions.
And is Duke in Florida State's division?
I think so. I would have to double check on that. The ACC one's
That's a
the one
bummer.
I know the least about.
That's a bummer because if Duke is not, or even if they can keep it close, if they can stay in that second spot real close to FSU, you're looking at a dark horse team to make a large bowl game, Duke. I really like what
And
Mike Elko has going there. It's like the best turnaround in like the last 10 years. They won one game 2 years ago and he got them to like 8 or 9 wins last year and keeps improving. Also, make you old moment. Al Blades' son playing safety on Duke.
yeah, that's not okay. I like vividly remember Al Blades playing at Miami, and his son was at Miami, right? He transferred
Yeah.
to Duke, I believe.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just getting to be that time where you're starting to see some guys that, were those early 2000s players who have kids who are in college. I mean, it makes a little bit of sense now. You're going to start seeing more and more of it. And it's
Hmm.
crazy. Like it's the natural rule of life. Like people have
Hmm.
kids, they grow up, but that one is wild to see his kid out there running
All
around
right.
when I like vividly remember his dad killing people
Yeah.
or the
All right. Yeah, I guess anything else you want to talk about week one? I have just two more quick notes. Uh
I have a couple that they're not big things. I just need to know what was out of these moments, what was the funniest to you? Butch Jones having to take a knee when it was 73-0, literally just like collapsing to the ground. I thought that was going to be the best moment until I saw Shane Beamer playing
Blame the
the
hot dog
chain game.
guys.
He's like, they're out. He's like, that's just the story of the game. We tried to kick an onside kick to start the second half, but the chain gang was out eating a hot dog.
Or
That one was,
or is it this? Or is it Michigan honoring like the dead coach play? But they had Harbaugh on a self-imposed ban.
that, and we had Hugh Freeze, who I don't even know who the girl was, but a
Yeah.
girl who I looked on her Twitter and it was like GOP Congresswoman, former Miss Ohio, and she just
Oh, and he
tweeted,
goes, War Eagle, baby.
he's like, you know what it is, War Eagle, and she was like, all she had tweeted was like, who's gonna win, FSU or LSU? And he just out of nowhere
Oh,
respond.
Hugh Freeze is so happy to be out of Liberty, and now he's at Auburn. He can get back to horny Freeze.
He can get back to horny Freeze, and basically, if he's winning, do whatever he wants to do,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
not bad
yeah.
enough.
As much as I would like to say one of the other ones, the Butch Jones on the knee one is my favorite. Like I'm laughing still. That Butch Jones went to the knee. He has his hand over his face like he's lost a loved one. And I
He
saw a
really,
quote tweet. I saw a quote tweet where it was like, "Man, if I saw a coach crying and we're up 70-0, I'm immediately calling for a Hail Mary because I got to drop 80 on him to see what happens."
I saw that one, and an underrated funny one, which you have to have Twitter to have seen this one, was the Ryan Day tweets when they were struggling to score against Indiana. Like I saw
Yeah,
one that was Ryan Day without a generational quarterback, and it was a picture of Charlie Weiss. And then I saw,
Charlie Weiss.
and those always, and it's like, I mean, I think Ohio State will be fine at quarterback. They usually, it takes guys a little bit to get going, but that is one of the things that I miss about other sports have good stuff, but football, college football specifically,
Mm-hmm.
you just have these characters who, like Butch Jones is, like you have to know the backstory of Butch
Yeah,
Jones for it to be
as
as
funny as it
funny as it
is.
is. But yeah, I think him taking the like just like the visual of him just literally
Yeah.
going down to a knee and the player like picking him up and like patting him on the back.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Man, that's a great way to end talking about week one. What a great week.
It was.
Week two. Let's get into some storylines, Zooch.
Yeah.
All right. Now, before we have a storyline, breaking news from the Zooch and Wild podcast crew. I will be in attendance this week of the Auburn Cal game in Berkeley. We will have boots on the ground to watch Auburn Cal this week, potentially the biggest sicko game of the week.
And it's you have to be careful because I see quite a bit of Auburn Twitter stuff, especially after I was endlessly searching Twitter for just hours on end last year when after Harsin got fired and
Mm-hmm.
Lane Kiffin was rumored to go there, and just kind of seeing like what people thought of Harsin, what if Lane Kiffin was going there. It is officially Cal Hate Week on Auburn Twitter, and they have people. I saw people going today. They were leaving today to get out to the.
I'd love to see those Auburn boosters when they get to Berkeley, California. Oh man, they are going to be comparing it to 1970s communist Yugoslavia in their mind. That's where they're going. That's where they're going.
Well, and two with that game, I think it's going to be one of those weirdly like for some reason when the Pac-12 plays the SEC, and it's always a game like that. Like you have Cal, Auburn, and then Mississippi State, Arizona. Those games are always pretty good and a lot closer than I think the SEC teams' fan bases think they're going to be. So it will be a interesting development if Cal ends up somehow like Auburn's riding pretty high. Like they have the coach, one of the coaches they wanted. They're happy to be rid of Brian Harsin.
Mm-hmm.
But if they lose this one, it's the SEC. He won't be on the hot seat literally, but it's gonna be almost a 180. They're gonna be like this guy because they're gonna look at Cal and be like, oh, it's Cal. They hardly ever win. No conference wanted them except the ACC finally just like lackadaisical invited them. So that will be a fun one to be at. What
No,
time does it
I'm
start?
I think it's a night game. I think it's a night game, but yeah, not too. Yeah, it is a night game, so that means it's going to be a half-empty Memorial Stadium, which will make it even better. It'll make it even better. But let's get to some actual good football storylines. Texas, Alabama. We got some band wars going on with the putting the bands in the top story, in the top level of the stadium. We got some unproven quarterbacks. I'm excited for this game.
I'm excited for that one too. And that's another one that's like a weird. I don't know. Like that almost seems like for Saban, it's not a make or break. Like they can lose that game and they're Alabama. Win out. Your only loss is to Texas. They'll make the playoff. But for Sark, we mockingly joke about the Texas is back, but he kind of needs to win that one. Like
I'll
they
tell
came
you,
close last year, but didn't win it. They had some losses last year they probably shouldn't have, and it's time for him to beat the allegations. The allegations against
yes,
him are you might win 8 or 9 games, but like 4 times a year, you will quite possibly look like the biggest moron to ever
it's
keep
also
getting these.
time for Texas to finally put that talent to use. We always see Texas on top of these recruiting classes, and then when it comes to NFL draft time, they're not sending many guys. And this year they will be able to send more guys than usual. You finally have a quarterback in Quinn Ewers, who, if you would have looked at this game 3 years ago, if I would have told you Texas is going to have the QB advantage versus Alabama, you would have called me crazy. But
Right.
they do. I mean, Jalen Milroe is good. He looked good last week. He might even look great last week, but Quinn Ewers is the more proven commodity. He's the more proven player. And this is Quinn Ewers was playing Alabama close last year until he got hurt. Texas probably would have won that game last year if Quinn Ewers doesn't get
Right.
hurt. So I'm excited for this game. I will say, win or lose, liquor stores of Tuscaloosa, watch out because Sark is coming.
He is coming. And he will be there regardless of the final outcome of that
Yeah,
game.
no, he will not. Yes, he will. Let's hope he's staying clean. But man, I don't want to hear another USC practice story from good old Sark. But yeah,
The
Zooch
man
is
who
good.
consistently loses and moves up in the world. I've never seen
Yeah,
anything like
he's
he
just
and
he's like the less athletic stepbrother of Cliff Kingsbury. They just always seem to move up and they just always seem to move up by just doing bare minimum.
yeah, like that Sark was at Washington and was fine. I guess the Jimmy Lake was terrible there, but the last Chris Peterson and Kalen DeBoer have made Washington like a top 10 team, and Sark
Hmm.
was 9-4, 8-5. Oh,
Hmm.
you're 6-0. Well, now it's time for you to, for some reason, lose to Stanford by 21. That's just what he does, and I mean, honestly, I could almost see Texas winning this game, and then next week it just all blowing up on them, and that's
They just lose
just
to like Baylor or something.
yeah, that's the allegations against him is that he doesn't always perform the best from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. I don't think he's ever had less than 4 losses in a season as a head coach. And he's
I,
had jobs at USC and Texas, like two of the
I
biggest power programs in the nation.
I cannot tell you either. I cannot tell you either. But let's get to your top storyline of the week.
So my top storyline of the week, it's got to be, and it's almost in an ironic way, this Colorado-Nebraska game. So
All
coming into
right.
the season, we already talked about what people thought of Colorado. But for Nebraska to come into the season and lose like they did last week,
Yes.
like if you told, and Nebraska has a great fan base, but Colorado was at the depths of hell and where their program was. One
Colorado's
win,
back before Nebraska. Colorado's back before Nebraska.
Colorado's back before Nebraska, and if you go up there and get, like, I think it'll be a close game. Nebraska, I mean, that's the crazy part about Nebraska. They have legitimately like 25 one-score losses,
Yeah. Matt Rule
and
will just be in his smock, his t-shirt windbreaker, just looking so distressed. And
and him,
Nebraska, they have talent, but I don't know who their quarterback is. When I was watching that Minnesota game, it looked like he couldn't read a defense. Like it actually looked like he couldn't read a defense.
Yeah, and it just I mean, the next guy is always supposed to be the guy, but it almost feels like they're at the point now where that's like they need to win that game.
Hmm.
Like I know, they'll be 0-2 with a conference loss and could still get to a decent bowl game. Teams all like there's a lot of teams that start out 0-2, 1-3,
Hmm.
whatever it is, and finish the season strong. But that's a bit, they're kind of recruiting rivals, and things are looking really positive right now in Colorado if you're a high profile recruit, and they haven't been
Hmm.
looking positive in Nebraska for a while. And I just don't know if you go to Boulder and lose that game, especially big,
Hmm.
how you like, they got to compete with these guys like Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, now USC, Washington is getting some good recruits. So they like that's a Colorado can lose that game and they'll be fine. Like,
Hmm.
it almost seems like to me Deion Sanders knows they're not going to go undefeated, and if they lose it, he'll be completely fine. Like, he won't be happy about it. But Nebraska starts out 0-2 in the Matt Rule era.
Chaos.
It's chaos, and Matt Rule didn't have the best ending in the NFL. I know that's a lot different than college, but there'll be some questions on if he was a lot of it comes from that Minnesota loss. Like, and it was just
And I think it's
it was
unfair.
how they
I
lost
think
too. Like,
Nebraska thinks they're better than they actually are. Matt Rule inherited a dumpster fire like Dion. However, he's not afforded the luxuries of Dion being able to pull from the transfer portal and having great players at Jackson just to pop over, and the connections of getting a world class staff right away, and having the pressure that Nebraska has. Nebraska needs to realize they are what Colorado should be with Dion. They're in for a long rebuild. I know they want a fast rebuild, but this is a program. It's probably going to take 3 or 4 recruiting classes. And I know Big Red Husker Nation doesn't want to hear it because they're missing the days of Tom Osborne and the Neck Roll boys on offensive line there. But it's not 1996 anymore, Nebraska.
yeah,
Like everyone has a
Nebraska
strength program. You just have to take a deep breath and realize, give Matt Rule a shot. Because if Matt Rule can't turn you around, you might as well become Indiana, honestly.
Nebraska went wrong when they played Miami in the national title game in like 2001, and Andre Johnson was running all over guys who basically thought if you ate oatmeal and did a couple of bench presses that you were going to win the national title. They haven't
They
changed. Like,
hadn't
I
seen a
cannot.
bubble screen.
Yeah, and that's what's we like. It's strange to me about them is like I cannot, off the top of my head, name like legitimately the best skill player they've had in the league. I think since 2000 is Rex Burkhead. Like, I seriously cannot think of a net like a
Amir
strong wide
Abdullah,
receiver that
maybe.
yeah, Amir Abdullah, he was fine, but
That's
they
wide
haven't
receivers. No, I can't think of one, honestly.
and they haven't had that in forever. They've had good defenses. Obviously, they almost beat Texas that year single-handedly with Ndamukong Suh because he was wrecking Texas basically all by himself. But
Hmm.
they very much lack in the skill position part of
Hmm.
football, and they're about to play a team who is basically built around our skill position players
Hmm.
are going to be better than yours. Like, Travis Hunter is probably licking his chops watching that quarterback's film,
Yeah,
and these receivers are probably like, "We're gonna." I mean, Minnesota's not a good offense, and
Minnesota had a 100-yard receiver. Minnesota. The one guy
yeah.
had
So
like
it's
9 catches.
and I like it's just that's a big game for like that'll be back to back weeks that Nebraska is kind of they played what last I guess they were up against the Utah Florida game, but
Yeah.
2 weeks in a row where you're one of them like they'll be the only really big game on at 10 in the morning at the big noon kickoff, and
Hmm.
that's a great place to show that you've kind of turned things around. And if they go out there and lose like 41-14, then like you said, it's going to be and I think he deserves a chance. I mean, at this point, Nebraska has to give Matt Rule a chance because if he doesn't work
Mhm.
out, where do you go from? It's the last coach you had was like the golden boy, and he was horrible. So if
Mhm.
this doesn't work out, I think I don't know. I just think I don't. Their best days might be past them already, but if he doesn't do a good job there, then I don't know where they turn in terms of
I
trying to
think
rebuild that program.
I
I
think
mean,
at
it
that
could,
point, then it's not. At that point, if I'll end it on this, if Matt Rule can't turn around Nebraska, it's not like, oh, like we're gonna bring Nebraska back. It's no, we have to start Nebraska because Nebraska
yeah.
has been over. Like there's no Nebraska's back. It's we started a new Nebraska. Zooch, I guess before we get into the weekly segments of me matchup and Hilo Buffalo, you want to give us a quick rundown of what you saw in Seattle for the UW Boise game? Just a couple minutes. What were some funny moments? What were the
Well,
emotions watching that game?
so we get to the stadium, and the night before, I had put a parlay on Colorado to win straight up and us to win straight up because I had some in one of my accounts and from Vegas. I'd had some
Hmm.
money left over in there on that Bet MGM or whatever it's called, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna take that money, transfer it to my bank account, put it on one that I use. It's like a foreign one that they basically like you have to do all this not weird, but it's not going to be in your account the next day if you want to cash out. So I did a $75 parlay on Colorado, Boise State to win straight up. So we're walking to the stadium. I'm trying to watch the end of that game. And that last uh, TCU drive was literally going on when the national anthem is about to start. And I'm like, because I had a ability to pull out of the before the second game started. So I was like, come and Colorado wins, right? So Colorado
Yeah,
wins. It was 75 to win almost $3,000.
and
Colorado wins. We score, go up 6-0. It's at like $900 that I could have,
and
and
it,
I didn't. I was like, no,
you
I'll
let
wait.
the Homer ride. Oh no.
Shouldn't have done it. I go to the bathroom and like come back to my seat. I'm like, what the hell happened? Like, why is Washington already on like the 2 year? And I was like, fast. Like, there was a bathroom right by our seats, and it just went. And like, there's some stuff I didn't even see on TV. Like, I sent it to you guys in the group chat the other day. I should have, if I would have seen whoever that was on the kickoff team just like blow his knees out, like without even being close to making a tackle, I would have been like, all right, I'm cutting my losses. Like the
I
900,
noticed that too. Did we figure out who that kid was who just like collapsed on the first play?
I have no idea, but
I
he like
feel bad
went.
because they're like, did someone like drag him off like he was a
I
wounded
did,
soldier? Like I thought they were gonna give him like a couple seconds, like, oh, there's a Boise State player down, looks like his knees hurt. Like they just
yeah.
completely glossed over it.
Well, I didn't even see what happened because I thought like when I was watching it live, I'm like, oh god, he's about to like house this. It's gonna be a long day, but it was a pretty decent first quarter. We looked pretty good, had a good long drive there, like 10 plays, 90 yards, whatever it was. But then Washington made an adjustment of what they were going to do on offense, which was basically, oh, let's run four verts because
Hmm.
they can't cover
They just didn't.
any of our.
They
I
just
mean,
didn't.
there
They
was,
didn't have the speed and the. I mean, that's the difference. There wasn't enough speed. I like the effort that Boise State played with, but the speed and quickness was definitely lacking at all the skill positions in terms of keeping up with Washington's receivers and creating space from Washington's secondary.
yeah, and I don't necessarily know that it should have been a 37-point loss. I mean, there were times that, we could have had like four first downs and guys were
Hmm.
dropping wide open passes. There was, just stuff like that. And just like, I don't know, it almost seemed like we couldn't adjust to anything they were like they were running basically the same 3 or 4 plays every time. And make no mistake, Michael Penix, Rome Aduzier, or however you say his last name, those guys are really good. But they look even better when you don't get any pressure on the quarterback after the first
Hmm.
drive of the game. So like they just BSU didn't play well, which added into Washington playing extremely well from the second quarter on. But it was still fun to go. It's a nice stadium. cool environment. The weather was really nice. I think it got up to like 80 that day. They had a pretty cool Boise State tailgate that we hung out at for a little bit. Nice to get off work for 4 days, go do that. So we'll see. They
Sounds
got
like a
a
blast, yeah.
yeah. We'll talk about it more next week after that
They
BSU UCF game. But
Oh, that's a big one. That's a
I'm
big
gonna
one.
have some thoughts if they don't win that game. I already
Well, we'll
have.
I'll make sure I'll put it down in my notes. Set aside some time for next week's show, win or loss, about Zooch, because we could have an all-time Zooch rant if they lose. We could.
Yeah, and I've been pretty. I mean, we won't get into it right now, but I was pretty defensive for a while of Hank Bachmeyer. I've been pretty defensive now for a while of Andy Avalos, but rent is due
We'll
now.
see.
So
We'll see. We'll see. All right. So now we're time for the weekly segments, the meme matchup of the week. And Zooch, I want to see if you have the same meme matchup as I do, because I think this one's as clear as day.
clears. So mine,
Is yours Iowa versus Iowa State?
I almost went with. I was going to go with that one, but I was looking through the games, and I
Okay.
had to go with UTEP versus Northwestern. Guess the line. Guess the line in that game.
19 and a half.
No, UTEP is favored.
Oh, 19 and a half. Oh, I thought you meant total points. My bad. No, UTEP is going to be favored by 7.5.
It was like when I last looked at it, 2.5. UTEP is favored at Northwestern.
At Northwestern.
At Northwestern, they're favored.
Man, Greeny and Ravel and all the Northwestern journalists are just clamoring and in their
They've
in their
taken an oath
houses
of
right now.
silence. I looked at all their Twitters the other
Yes, they
day
have.
after that game, and they are not speaking on it.
Northwestern, they're always so loud when someone else breaks the rules or does something weird. But when Northwestern, it's crickets over there by the lake in Evanston. No, oh my gosh, that's at Northwestern. Is that a night game or is that a day game? Please tell me it's a night
I
game. So they have to bring if it's a night game and they have to bring in the the temporary lights, because how are you? Because they're the a Big Ten stadium that doesn't have permanent lighting. Everything about Northwestern is a meme to me.
yeah, if you are ever which I can't say much because we lost to them by 17 last year, but if you are a Power Five school and you are underdogs to Texas El Paso, things have gone more wayward than possibly imaginable.
At home dogs. I mean, Boise State lost to them last year, but even with Hank Bachmeyer on this year's Boise team, I still think Boise State would have been favored by a couple points this year if they played on the blue.
Yeah, we
Like
were
that
favored
is
by like 17 or something last year. I mean, it didn't go well at all. People lost their jobs after
the
that
Miners.
game.
Yip 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 yip. Miners. Yip 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 yip. They have like the orange and the blue guy in the Sun Bowl. Oh man, those guys are awesome. Well, I alluded to it before. My meme matchup is the obvious. Some might say this is the meme Super Bowl. Iowa versus Iowa State. And we know all about the Ferentz brothers, the wild adventures of the Ferentz brothers. And this is a matchup that'll bring a tear to your eye if you love the grittiness of college football. And I'm going to read you a stat line, Zooch, of Iowa State's quarterback last week, Rocco Becht, who just sounds like the most Midwestern quarterback of all time, Rocco Becht. His stat line, and mind you, this is against Northern Illinois, 10 for 13 for 113 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, but 10 for 13 for 113 yards. Their leading rusher had like 50 yards. This is going to be a game that is so. This is like the classic 23-17 matchup, and some tight end's gonna break a 70-yard touchdown on a play action. I can't wait for it. And to top it all off, Donald Trump's gonna be there to watch it. I
He
saw
will
some
be.
tweets that said I would rather be in prison than watch an Iowa State game.
Yeah, that would be a. I mean, I'm sure he's there for like campaigning reasons or whatever it is. He's a politician. It's good to make a showing at those things because you are gonna at that game. Definitely, he'll get cheered, I guess. But there is not a game I would rather go to. I just watching. I can even watch Iowa on TV. Like I'll put one of their games on, and it hurts my like head to watch it because they have not developed an offense since like 1937. Like their offense still like I almost think that Kirk Ferentz still thinks we live in like the Prohibition era with how he
Do you remember
runs.
when they lost to Michigan State in the Big Ten championship in like 2015, like 14 to like 12? Like literally, if they would have scored like 2 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion, like they would have been playing in the college football playoff, but they couldn't.
That
Like that's
that is
Iowa.
Iowa for you.
I mean that's Iowa, and it's so funny. But hey, Trump, 6'3", 215. Maybe Iowa could use him as tight end.
If he is on the field, I will. It'll be funny, no matter what you think about the man. When they show him on TV in an Iowa State game, it will be
It'll be the
of
meme.
like
That's why it's the meme matchup. Everything about it is a meme. Everything about that game is a meme. The fans is a meme. The quarterback plays a meme. The offense is a meme. The defense is a meme. Donald Trump's there. That's a meme. This is it's oh, I'm getting chills just thinking about it, watching that game. And I
that
know I'm going
one
to turn
will
it off
be
in the second quarter because it will be bad.
because it will be 3-0 after the first quarter.
Yeah.
If
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Well, we're going to move into our last segment now, high low Buffalo. And it is week 1, so we got to get a little bit of overreactions in there. This is high low Buffalo coaches hot seats post week 1. I can go first. And this again, like I said last week, for my high of coach on the hot seat, it's punching down. It's Neil Brown, and it's not even hot at this point. He's just on fire.
yeah, he
Because he's going to be fired. He is going to be fired. I wasn't right about a lot of stuff last week, but I was right about West Virginia getting the absolute bricks beaten off of them. My goodness, Neil Brown needs to go yesterday. If you're a West Virginia fan, and like you said, I don't. I think he's the kind of guy who doesn't even realize like he's going to get fired, and he's going to go what?
no, he has no clue. He's gonna be like just floored today, and it's I can't even believe they brought him back this year, but they just can't. Like you would think they would look. I mean, I know Penn State's supposed to be good, but you would think they would have at least if they had lost like 37-30, you'd be like, all right, they're a top 10 team. You played them on the road. That's a respectable loss, but they got killed and it was by a quarterback making his first ever start. Like you couldn't
Hmm.
draw up anything to like throw the dude off of his game or anything like
Yeah,
that. I mean,
It wasn't it wasn't good. I mean, and that's Neil Brown. I think Neil Brown's the kind of guy he needs to go back to a smaller FBS school or like a coordinator job at a big FCS school and get his mind right before he gets another big time coaching gig. Um, low for a coach on a hot seat is Mike Norvell, Florida State. I think with that win, Florida State fans can kind of let a big exhale out and go, okay, the project, the process, as Joel Embiid would say, has paid off or is starting to pay off. You know, the first couple of years of Mike Norvell was a little iffy, but he told everyone down in Tallahassee, "Hey, stay with it. You got to stick with the program. You know, trust me." He did a great job of getting transfers in the portal. Keon Coleman looked great last Saturday, and I think Mike Norvell can finally have a little bit of exhale. I know it's only one game, but I think you can kindly finally see the vision that he'd been preaching for a while.
yeah,
Sure.
I think they're probably very happy they kept him because, I mean, if they had done worse than 9-3 last year or 10-3, I don't know that they would have kept him, but I think he is. And, you never know with these coaches because you get some guys like even Dabo Swinney when he first started at Clemson, his seat
Hmm.
was getting pretty warm and, they were patient, paid off. They ended up
Hmm.
being basically a dynasty. Then you get guys like Scott Frost, who you give the benefit of the doubt to, and it just
Never
gets
pays off.
worse and worse and worse. So that one seems like it's
Finally paying off for the
finally paying
Seminoles
off because
down there.
they could that schedule's looking a lot less tough with how Clemson looked, and
If
we
they
don't know
if they
enough
can get
about Miami yet.
if they can get past Clemson, look out. That's what I'm saying. Get past Clemson, look out. Then my Buffalo coach, and I made it specifically when we were talking about this segment. I didn't want to do head coaches. I just said coaches on the hot seat. Did I say head coaches in the intro? I hope I didn't, because my Buffalo coach is Brian Ferentz. I mean, because he has to hit that 25 point average total from to keep his job, and he has to keep the eight. I think they have to win 7 or 8 games for him to keep his job as O coordinator. And he scored 24, I believe, versus Utah State, which is hitting the mark. But you have to think, man, you're gonna play some good Big Ten schools later in the season. You want to try to front load on Utah State, so it's like, yeah, I guess you hit your mark, Brian. But like, does he think he's gonna score? Like, do they play Michigan or Ohio State this year or Penn State? They have to play
I'm
one of
not.
those.
Yeah, I'm sure they play one, if not two of them. I'm not entirely sure
Like,
which
are
ones.
you gonna score like that many points? That's what I mean. It's because kind of the Buffalo. Like technically, like he went just under hitting 25 points a game, so he's on track. But it's Utah State. If I was a Hawkeye fan, I would hope to see a little bit more.
Yeah, it seems like, we had the guy comment on our thing about Iowa's offense the other day, and it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, we scored 42 against Utah State last year, and our offense was far from great. Like,
Hmm.
Utah State is a middling Mountain West team, and you only put up 24 points against them. I hate to see what you're going
Their
to do
fans
against.
think they're Georgia, though. The Utah State fans, they think
That is
they're
true.
Georgia combined with Notre Dame, combined with the Brazilian national football team. Yeah.
Yeah, he might be wishing he had a couple more touchdowns when they start getting into conference play, because that
Hmm.
25 points per game mark is looking like he might not be hitting that too often. So for my high, I'm going to go, it's kind of outside the box. GJ Kinney led Texas State to their first ever win over like a Power 5 school,
Yes,
legitimately
sir.
their first win since moving up. Now, I was looking at their schedule, and they play Texas San Antonio this week. Texas San Antonio this week, I believe. And then after that, they have Jackson State and start getting into their Sun Belt portion of the schedule. So if they can win, and Texas San Antonio is supposed to be pretty good this year. They lost to Houston by 3. That will happen. Houston is a pretty good team. But if he can get them to, that team has been horrible for years. If he can get them to 9 or so wins, he's moving on up in the rank. Like, he's been an offensive coordinator. He was playing not that long ago. He was a quarterback at Tulsa, like less than 10 years ago,
I
I'm pretty
love the
sure.
Tulsa fun fact that like that school only has like 2,000 kids, and somehow they're able to like form like an FBS program.
Yeah, they are quite possibly the most random FBS program there is. It's like sometimes I'll see them and, oh, they're 1-9, makes sense, and then other years they'll be like 10-2, and you're like, why are
No,
they
it makes sense.
so
That's
good
it's
for
like
absolutely no
like
reason? Yeah.
yeah, I could see Tulsa playing in like the Holiday Bowl, or like I could see them like relegated to like the Ohio Valley Conference tomorrow, and I wouldn't blink an eye at either.
Yeah, they are just there. That's the perfect way to
Hmm.
describe them. Is Tulsa is just there. But yeah, if he can do some like, who knows how it'll, Baylor, from what I read, didn't play all that great, couldn't line up right, stuff like that, didn't look all that prepared. But if he beats Texas San Antonio, they'll beat Jackson State. That puts you at 3-0 going into the Sun Belt. You get 9 or 10 wins, and some of these schools, like we talked about earlier, West Virginia might come calling, Iowa might come calling. There'll be some decent gigs out there.
So this is like a hot seat in terms of he will leave after the season not being fired, but it's a hot seat in terms of he's out of Texas
Yeah,
State as fast as possible if someone else calls.
I would think so, because it's, a relatively small school. They don't have, it's not like a Boise State or UCF or Memphis, who
Mhm.
has like a pretty decent history that could, maybe they will fork up the money and try to get him to stay. But there's so many bigger schools around there that I think people are, they might have gone to Texas State, but they give their money to A&M or Texas
Mhm.
or whoever it is.
And for those people, have some integrity. Come on now. Support the
Yeah,
Bobcats.
support. If you're an alumni, support the school you went to with donations at least. And then for my low, I really think that it's kind of going into this week, but the low is going to be the winner of this Miami Texas A&M game, because that, you know, Jimbo Fisher has to win that game. If he wins that game, people will be all high on Texas A&M. Like, oh, could they win the West? LSU doesn't look as good. You never know with Ole Miss. Mississippi State has a new coach, new offense, so on and so forth. Like, they usually play pretty well against Alabama. Same thing for Miami. If they win this game, they're looking at, I'm pretty sure they play Clemson. They're looking at that and are like, Florida State doesn't look that good. North Carolina's fine. NC State's fine. But they could be I think the winner of that game has a legitimate shot at the college football playoff. The loser is going to be feeling it a little bit, especially if their name is Jimbo Fisher and they've had a top 5 recruiting class for like 10 years in a row and can't seem to get it together.
Well, as you pointed out last week, the troublesome trio of Petrino, Fisher, and who's the other guy? Who's the other Petrino, Fisher,
The
and
DC.
yeah, that
I
can't think
cannot
of
think of
either.
his name off the top of my head, but yeah, the Hellhounds.
Yeah, but no, did you see the on the quick topic of Miami? I do think this is a big game for them. Cristobal, it's kind of like the same situation as Matt Rule at Nebraska. If he can't put it together, who can at Miami? If Mario freaking Cristobal can't get your program around. But did you see the they're begging people to get to this game? It's actually quite sad. They're saying, if did you see the promotion they're running, where if you buy like a special ticket to the Texas A&M Miami game, you get a free ticket to the Georgia Tech game. If you're a big football school in the South, you cannot do that. You
No.
cannot have a promotion like that. That is what we call an oh man, I don't want to throw a school under the bus, but I will. That is a UNLV type promotion. I mean, Boise State has that kind of promotion. I mean, like if you are Miami, you are a 5-time national champion. You cannot be running. The Miami boosters hacked my stuff. They didn't like what I was saying about Cristobal. Um, but yeah, I think Cristobal definitely on the hot seat about if he doesn't win this game.
Yeah, it's there's a lot, like the Alabama Texas one is obviously the biggest matchup, but there's a lot of smaller matchups that have a lot of implications for the people involved.
We need to say a prayer for Dan Libatard and Danny Boy Kane this weekend. This is a big weekend for them. This is especially a big weekend for Danny Boy Kane.
It is. Well, last week he had to address the NIL rumors that he was like running in NIL like all by himself.
Yeah.
That was 2 years after he came out and said that he was not accepting the offensive coordinator position at Miami.
Danny Boy Kane. Yeah, he's not accepting the offensive coordinator position. Yeah, and I'm not accepting the position of president. I wasn't elected. I'm just not accepting it. I'm just not accepting it. It's essentially what happened with Danny Boy Kane.
And then for my Buffalo, he's a big name coach, and one of those games that I said, was kind of under the radar. But this Boise State game is a big game for Gus Malzahn. And I think Gus Malzahn is extremely underrated. He pretty much was almost 500 with Auburn against Nick Saban, which is Nick Saban's like 502 against everybody else in the SEC. Even like Kirby Smart's beat him once or twice?
Once.
But it's,
I always thought it was a shame that Auburn fired him. I always thought it was a shame.
I think
they fired Gus Malzahn for Idaho Gus Malzahn.
Yeah, like I said, I think he is extremely underrated when it comes to being a head coach. Like, yeah, he's not going to go undefeated every year, but his teams are never ever bad. Like, there's never a time where you're like, oh, Auburn was really bad. And people forget he won Gene Chizik a national title. He won Gene Chizik. He was the offensive coordinator when Cam Newton was there. And then he left, and he was pretty good at Arkansas State. I thought he was very good. I don't think Auburn ever should have fired him. I get they had a lot of hype for a couple seasons, and it didn't pan out how they wanted to, but he got them to one national title
Stidham
game.
as their quarterback. You were never going to win a national champion with JT Stidham or Jared Stidham.
Yeah. Well,
he got Malzahn is a good coach. He's a good coach.
Took the Nick Marshall guy, who was a converted cornerback, and got them within Florida State scored with 20 seconds left in that game to win the national title. And then they lost the SEC championship the one year that they had a couple losses and would have made the playoff if they had won that SEC title. So it's not like, he was just never winning games. But I think he's one of those guys that gets an unfair rap. And from what I've read from UCF fans, I think they're under the assumption that they should be better than what they are. Not that they're bad. They are pretty much in the American Athletic Championship every year. They moved up this year. We'll see how they do. But, I just think people will be like, oh, we're going to the Big 12. Boise State just got killed. He lost that game. Let's start looking for other options. So we'll see. But he undeservedly is my Buffalo, I would say.
I think that's a fair Buffalo. You put some respect on Gus Malzahn. Let's put some respect on. He's that visor and those square sunglasses. They're better than Urban. Okay, they're not sunglasses, but they're better than Urban's color shading glasses that he wears on Big Noon Kickoff. The ones that are clear inside and dark during the outside segments.
Yeah, Troy was having quite the laugh at what Urban Meyer looked like on the Big Noon.
He always just looks like the little league dad who got kicked out of the game for yelling at the 12-year-old ump, and then he has to sit in center field and just angrily chew cracked pepper seeds, going spitting all over the place. But he's the gift that keeps on giving. We have a whole fall of herb. Anything else you want to say, Zooch?
I don't think so. I'm excited. I don't know who plays tomorrow night. It's going to get overshadowed because the NFL starts tomorrow night, but the big weekend of college football, we'll get into it on Saturday. I'm sure we'll all be texting back and forth. Some of us might be having a conniption fit if a certain team that plays on a blue field is down multiple scores. But we'll see on Saturday.
It'll be fun. Just a reminder, we are going to have boots on the ground. Berkeley, California. It's going to be a fun time. I have not seen. Oh, now that I'm thinking about it, this is where I ended. I don't think I've ever seen an SEC team play in person. I guess I've seen Oklahoma play in person, and I guess that's technically an SEC team now. I don't think I've ever seen an SEC school play in person before.
Well, will have.
I cannot wait to see the fan. I cannot wait to see these Auburn fans. Oh man, they're gonna go to these I'm honestly gonna feel bad. This is essentially like the bully in the '90s high school movie shoving the kid in the locker. This is what I think Auburn fans will do to Cal fans. But thank you for listening to episode 3 of Zooch and Wilde podcast. Make sure to follow Settle Down on Instagram. It's just at Settle Down Pod, right? Zooch, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Or is it just at Settle Down? I don't know. It's got a blue microphone for a profile pic. So make sure you follow us on Instagram, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
See you guys. Thanks.